Excellent. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Modern Sales Pros discussion around mutual action plans and why they matter, sponsored by our friends in Portland, DealPoint. And today I have a very awesome opportunity. This is the first time we've had on two panelists with the same name. So every question I ask, we're going to get two answers, which is really exciting. But both Tom Williams and Tom O'Keefe, we have a little bit of a tradition here in Modern Sales Pros for our panelists. As folks are getting in and getting settled, we like to ask our panelists one new skill that they've developed or hobby that they've honed since the start of the pandemic. And Tom O'Keefe, this is your first time here, so we'll start with you. No pressure.
That's awesome. Thanks. Great to be here. Super nice, Richard. Pleasure to be a part of the conversation. I'm all in on landscaping right now. So it's kind of like my own therapy after 17 Zoom meetings in a row, I'm completely exhausted and truly want to maybe throw myself off a building. I just go out in the yard and I kind of work around and have redone my entire backyard over the course of the last 5 months. So I'd say that's kind of where I put my mental energy and trying to refresh time. And then my golf game has gotten tidy. I went from a 15 handicap down to a 7. So,
wow, that's a serious improvement there. But I got to ask Tom O'Keefe, and not being cynical, but what's the plan for the next 5 months? Are you going to work on the front yard? Is that kind of the focus?
We sold our company. I'm sort of a recovering CRO. I think we'll deal with introductions in a bit, but we sold as a CEO. I recently sold my business. So I got to enjoy the summer. So it's probably back to work in September, and the handicap will get back up to 15 to 18 and hopefully, life will get back to normal, but we're all excited to get back to an office. I'm sure.
Yeah. Fingers crossed that we can get back to normal life. And of course, Tom Williams, this is your second or third time here as joining MSP.
Something like that. Yeah.
And longtime member, and fun fact about Tom, he actually saved the first day I met Tom. We were walking across the street. I jaywalked like a complete New Englander, and Tom was like, "Hey, you're about to get run over," and pulled me back to avoid getting run over up in Seattle.
I remember that. Yeah.
Tom, I actually owe you my life, so thanks for that. Fun fact for you. But so Tom Williams, any other new hobbies that you've developed, skills, tricks that you've honed since the start of the pandemic?
Well, yeah, last time we talked, I had actually been researching how to remove tear gas from your eyes and, milk of magnesium. But now it's all about how to duct tape every window in your house so that the smoke can't come in. And we're really good at that. We are 100% all environmental catastrophe proof, just waiting for the big earthquake.
We keep encouraging Tom to find a better neighborhood to live in here in Portland, but he's an adventurer.
Dedicated.
Tom sounds like he's going to be prepared for like the zombie apocalypse if that ever happens. Knock on wood. Hopefully not.
I was kicked out of the Boy Scouts, but before being kicked out, I was a very good Boy Scout. So yeah, I'm totally got my Boy Scout necklace, and I am prepared.
Well, folks, we're excited to have both Tom Williams and Tom O'Keefe on. This is going to be an exciting session. I had a nice chance to prep with the Toms beforehand. Lots of good stories and lots of good conversation. So before we get into that, just a few words about Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who don't know, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest community for revenue leaders in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales enablement, and the related supporting disciplines. We have about 20,000 members, and our goal is to create an environment for our community members where they can answer questions they'd otherwise struggle to solve on their own. We do that through awesome online discussions like what we're going to have here today, where we bring in experts and subject matter experts to dive into particular topics. We also have a very robust online message board. And when you ask questions of MSP, not only do you get to interact with great speakers like the Toms, you also have the opportunity to get perspective from across all of these organizations, and about 6,000 others have members in the community. So it's a great opportunity to learn, doesn't cost anything. And for those of you who aren't members that are in the audience here today, we'll get you added and invited shortly thereafter. But enough about us. Today's programming wouldn't be possible without the sponsorship of the team at DealPoint. I'm going to hand it over to Tom Williams, co-founder and CEO at DealPoint, to share a little bit about himself and then also introduce Tom O'Keefe.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, real quick. So I'm Tom, the CEO of DealPoint. All came about from a frustration with reps having these happy ears and us not getting to customer value because we didn't really know what they were doing. So we started DealPoint to make it easier for sales teams and buyers to align and make sure that we're actually all working towards customer value. Been doing it for about 4 years, got a great team all here in Portland. I've known Tom O'Keefe for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. He is one of the mainstays of the Portland sales community, and he was kind enough to agree to be one of our advisors. Fantastic sales leader, really good acumen, and just a good sort to have on the team. So thank you very much, Tom, for being on the team.
I appreciate it. It's really great to be here. I'd only add, like, from my perspective, a short bio. I'm like total recovering CRO, sales operations leader. That's been my background. I've got a revenue bias all day, every day, all the way through to renewal. So I'm sort of always interested in sales enablement technologies. Spent a lot of time looking at and exploring technology trends around like Chorus and Gong. I really liked what they were up to because I had a chapter in AI, and I love to record presentations and go back and look at them. It ran in, like I said, we've known Tom for a while, and I really like the idea of this planning with a customer concept. We used it internally when we were taking customers live after they signed. So I don't think it's kind of, there's no controversy at post signature that we're going to create a plan to get you implemented it on platform, which we've always used. And it seemed incredibly important to think about that as a sales activity. And so I'm super psyched to be here and talk a little bit about how this plays out in our world. You gotta get off mute there, Rich.
I am muted. I took a sip of water. I've already my first gaff here. Excited to have you both here. Great experience and great perspective. Just 2 housekeeping notes for those of you attending. 2 things. First, please do use the question and answer panel. That will help me make sure that the Toms can provide good perspective on that. And also, if you ask a great question, maybe we don't get to it live. Maybe Tom O'Keefe wants to follow up with you afterwards to learn a little bit more. Second point on that, the first question that always comes up, is the session recorded? Yes, the session is recorded. We'll share the recording shortly afterwards. So with that, let's jump into this a little bit. So today we're going to hit on a couple key topic areas. We're going to hit on, when are mutual action plans? How do they move the needles? What's a great mutual action plan look like? How do you introduce it? And then how do you really drive adoption? This is a great tool, great strategy, but like if we can't get the reps to do it, what's the point? And so I'll kick this over to Tom Williams to get us started. But where and how do you see mutual action plans moving the needle?
Thank you, Richard. When we look at sales leaders as what are the things that are most important to our sales organizations, we see the big 5 really. Ultimately, at the top, we need to make sure that the customers are achieving value. Mutual action plans can help there because you've aligned on what is that customer's value and you're working towards it. But in order to make sure that you are in a place where you can have a good forecast, you need to understand where are our resources going to be allocated? Are we going to hit our number? That's a very important point for a sales leader to be able to deliver to the board. And mutual action plans can help there as well. In order to understand your forecast, you need to have deal review at scale. So you want to be able to see where are we on each of these plans. And you can imagine that you've got, say, 30 reps. They have 20 opportunities each. That's 600 opportunities that your managers need to have mastery of. If you don't have that mastery, then you're not going to have an accurate forecast. And a mutual action plan gives you that milestone level detail view so that you can confidently understand where are we at on each of these deals. At a rep level, they need to be communicating with their customers so they can actually understand where are we on this individual deal. So individual deal management, I'd say that's the most traditional place where a map would be introduced. But what we've seen our customers use them is not just in the individual deal management, but up and down the value chain as well. And then finally, all of this is impossible if you don't have a well-defined and well-qualified deal. So a mutual action plan makes a fantastic tool to say to the customer, I've heard that you want some value, and I think we can help you with that. Let me show you how we've done this before in the past. Can I show you? It acts as a great first trial close. If they say, yeah, I'm interested in how this would work, then first of all, you know that they're an interested customer, which is good for qualification. But second, you can start to lay out the things that you need to know. And because you're asking within the context of them having their problem fixed, they're a lot more likely to engage with you. So mutual action plan can work from discovery all the way through to the close, but then all the way through to actually making sure that the customer sees value. So really, it's kind of cool. It's in all the different steps of the sales cycle that mutual action plan is kicking in and adding value.
And I guess, and Rich, let me just add that, since I'd say my optics sometimes when I got introduced, this was really as a board member. So I sit on 2 private equity boards, fairly large sales organizations, and revenue forecasting right now in the COVID era has been particularly challenging. And and obviously resource allocation is super critical. To me, that's the layer. I think when I looked at the people who are going to be on this presentation today, a bunch of CROs, operations leaders, and sales, all your work bubbles up to the board presentations to let us know how we're doing and whether or not we're going to go make our plan or not, and look for additional capital or liquidity events, whatever that might be. So, to me, I really grunt on the revenue forecasting element of the culmination of all this good work with a mutual action plan should enable a better performance around how you relate to your CEO and your board. And that's, obviously super exciting and value add.
Well, and yesterday, Tom, we were talking to a customer who said actually it's the resource allocation that's the killer, because if a prospect, if they have a good looking deal, they're going to bring in all sorts of external resources from other departments. And then when those choke, it's real bad. Not only do they lose respect within their organization, so they burn a bunch of political capital, but also if they over allocate, then the deals that do go live are under allocated. So, I heard this funny tale from a friend of mine who he came in at 150% over forecast, and he thought, great, I killed it. But actually it was a bad thing, because everybody else had to just hustle like crazy to make the order. So, bad is missing the deal, but it's the forecast, but actually it's not great for the whole organization if you're going over as well. You need to be accurate so that everybody can plan on what do we have to do over the next quarter. So I think that is the interesting component of an accurate forecast.
Well, and I think another part on that too, Tom, I think we can think of that sometimes as, that doesn't happen in SaaS, right? If we're above forecast, everybody's happy, and that's just not true. You need to provision, maybe it's additional people on the customer success side, or you need to make sure you've got more servers turned on or whatever.
Yeah, it's the people. It's always the people that you can always turn on new servers, but it's the people that get over allocated, and that's when you blow the customer achieves value stage, because you sold this fantastic bag of goods, and then it turns out there's nobody to support the opportunity, and you end up looking worse, and there's no renewal at the end of that. So it's bad all the way around.
Well, and we've got our first poll result in here, and it's the question we asked folks was, what is the minimum deal size when you would introduce a mutual action plan? The minimum deal size you'd introduce a mutual action plan.
Yeah, this is really interesting. When we did our original research on Maps, it was nearly exclusively at the top of the market. So 100K, 200K up, and people wouldn't do it below that. But we've seen a distinct trend of that ACV coming down. And my belief is it's because given COVID and we're all staying at home, it's a lot harder to go and be a charming salesperson and make the deal, whiteboarding, getting the deal there. So the need to be better organized, which kind of what a map embodies, has become more important to more organizations. We've certainly seen a lot more inbound just over the past 3 months than we had earlier in the year. And I think a lot of that is because sales leaders going, we can't rely on handsome, charming people anymore. We need to have better process, and they can't look over everybody's shoulder. So I'm not surprised that I'm seeing some of those average deal sizes coming down. And I'm all for it. The more we can democratize better planning and more transparency. I heard this great quote from Tana McDermott at Workiva. She said, no customer ever argued with clear expectations. So we've all been doing this ever since day one. We're just formalizing it a little bit better with a mutual action plan so we can get consistency across the sales team.
The analogy I love, and we've talked about this a lot in Modern Sales Pros, is renewal is like when you would review your report cards with your parents. And the report card grading actually starts on the discovery call. It doesn't start when the contract is signed. And mutual action plans are a great tool to get there. Let's dive into this a little bit more though here. So thinking about when buyers would use it, or would they, back to this expectations point, Tom, I'd love for you to share a little bit on these results here.
Yeah, we did a LinkedIn poll a while back because we sell mutual action plan, a mutual action plan platform. And so the question we get a lot is from from our rep customers. Well, how do I know they're even going to use it? So we put this poll out in the field as we were asking buyers, decision makers, and it really lines up with what Tanner said. Please, for Christ's sake, tell me what's happening. They've never bought your thing before. They have this burning problem. They don't know what's going on. Of course they want to know, because they're on the hook with their boss to fix whatever that problem was. They want to be able to say, I have a plan, boss. It looks like this. So to the extent that you can help the customer understand where they're at too, of course they want to know. So that transparency goes a long way. And yeah, we heard overwhelmingly, please, yeah, tell me what's happening. Let me know what's happening.
Yeah, and I guess if I would add, like, just from when I saw these results, and it was really great to see, because obviously this is from the buyer's point of view, but it probably suggests, when you look at 40% of the people have never really engaged through this type of methodology as a buyer with a seller. It's probably not that surprising, because, given how many sellers are executing candidly quite poorly, they may have their own seller plan and they're somewhat exposing the checklist of things that need to be a part of qualification or whatever else, but they're not thinking about like building a relationship that lasts over time. I actually think mutual action plans are going to persist forever. And I'm actually challenged the organization at DealPoint to think about the endless action plan, because in a SaaS selling environment, we aren't just selling. You mentioned the renewal cycle, but it's also the upgrade cycles, the new enhancement cycles. There's a ton of moments that are going to happen over the course of hopefully 5 to 7 years. If you've sold your product correctly, then you're going to get the full lifetime value of that customer, and you're going to continuously plan with that customer and re-engage. And having something that's articulated from day one to that point in time, I think is the end game for all of this. And it's disappointing, candidly, that people aren't saying, I actually see action plans all the time. I just kind of haven't seen them in sales. But boy, that makes a lot more sense if I could see it across my entire relationship with the organization.
Well, and I think one of the other points here is those people who say it's too cumbersome. I'd say there's a very good chance that person's not going to buy. If they can't be bothered to understand what does it take to buy your product, they're probably not going to buy your product. So I think it's a fantastic disqualification. It's not a black or white thing, but it's certainly a red flag. This person doesn't want to know what it would take to make this happen. That's not a good sign. So it doesn't hurt my feelings if somebody says, I don't want to know what's happening. It actually is a great clarifier and lets me say, okay, let's reconvene some other time when knowing what you want to do is more important to yourselves.
Well, I think that comes back to some of what we talked about before, the value of a mutual action plan being really helping in resource predictability, and that being people. If I can spend less time working with a customer who's with a high likelihood maybe DQ'd themselves out of my pipeline, that's maybe one extra meeting I can bring the sales engineer to with a deal that is going to progress. So it's I think that's a net positive thing that folks shouldn't be afraid of, the disqualification. I think it should be celebrated. I know, Tom, you share that as well.
Yeah. Well, and don't forget that the buyer has a team as well. The buyer has responsibilities, and they're asking their partner, their colleagues to make time to say, hey, will you help me evaluate this vendor? That takes a lot of political requests as well. So if the buyer keeps saying, hey, can you evaluate this vendor? Hey, can you do this? Can you do that for me? Can you help me fix my problem? If there's no organized structure for the buyer, then they're going to look like a fool, constantly going to their colleagues and saying, can you look at this? Can you do this? And that's not the reputation you want to have inside your own organization. So I think that's also driving that buyer decision. They're like, yeah, I want to look like I know what I'm doing. I want to look like I partnered with a vendor who knows what they're doing, who has my interests in mind. Because this is a really interesting COVID aspect. I know I ran sales teams for years. If I wanted to buy a new technology, I would wait for the right moment to ask the boss, to approach them about, hey, can I spend 50 grand on this thing? And I would hunt them over the course of the morning and see where they're at. And I'm visualizing Dave Schmaltz here, by the way. So if Dave was in a good mood, I would go and talk to him. If he was real grumpy, I would wait till tomorrow. But that kind of socialization has been severely hammered in the COVID time. everything is a Zoom interrupt. And so you need to have your ducks in a row way more when you're making a presentation, because there's a very good chance that your boss just got shouted at by their 6-year-old and they don't really want to hear about your request for another 50K. So you got to have your ducks in a row as the buyer, which is why they're interested in having these plans.
I think another point on this too, and Tom Williams, we've chatted about this quite a bit, but every organization is curious about going up market. Maybe they're exploring selling to the enterprise. Mutual action plans are a great tool to show your buyer you understand how they buy as well. Hey, well, Tom, yeah, good.
I mean, you understand how they buy, and perhaps they don't. There's a very good chance that they've never bought your thing before. And so you can educate your champ. Maybe somebody else in the organization knows the procurement system, but they may not know. You're probably going to want to queue up a security review, because every one of our other customers in your circle has done a security review. So who would that be in your team? And they can start working those internal favors and priorities, so that otherwise what happens is they say, yeah, I love it, I'm going to buy it, I love it. And then they hit the procurement wall and they're like, where's the security review? And boom, everything's pushed back a month because security has a backlog a month long before they can look at the product. You can go around all of that stuff, and all it is being more transparent with the customer. It doesn't sound crazy. Tell the customer.
I'd love to only add from my point of view. Again, I look at it, my own experience. Buyers generally come in 3 versions, right? Heavily organized, RFI, RFP based. They have a checklist on their own. Moderately organized, single buyer, without a lot of discipline in the buying process, who probably would appreciate some structure, and we're giving them an opportunity to be a more disciplined buyer. I think that's value add. And then somebody who's just exploring, to your point, is really, it's not even a deal, but because of the way sometimes Salesforce operates from lead to account conversion, opportunity management, it creates, auto-generates an opportunity at an early stage, and we end up with really foul pipelines that are bloated and at the bottom, and deal lengths are misrepresented. I think you made a comment, Rich, about let's get to deal losses really fast, and I don't even see them as losses. Let's just get these opportunities. They weren't real opportunities. There was never any real budget, timeline, intention. The big 3 that I've always thought about, they just simply didn't have it. They might have had a little interest, but that's not an opportunity. I think this whole idea of creating a plan is absolutely on solid ground. We've always done it, and the best buyers always want it. And I think in the mid buyer, you're really helping them deliver it, which is great.
Yeah, I think that this is great. And Tom, I know you both Toms have a ton of experience with this, but when we think about this, I want to bring it back to a comment that Tom O'Keefe made before, where this is sort of an ongoing plan. It's not a mutual action plan. It's sort of evergreen and constantly part of the relationship.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I struggled with, the idea of we're introducing, the DealPoint was about maps. DealPoint is a technology platform that enables really professional selling and relationship building and renewal processes to occur. Mutual planning, if you just took the actions out, just mutual planning is a common enterprise endeavor that we've always done. Any discipline or sales organization and implementation organization has plans. And the action, why it's important, is it creates action and accountability for the buyers at certain stages, that people in the deal teams on my side and on the buying side have certain responsibilities. And if we sign up for those, I think they get done. And so when inside, this isn't a product demo. We're not here to tell you to buy DealPoint. I'm here to tell you that you should be more organized, and you can, and it is your right as a seller to say to a customer, hey, you need to get me these things if we're going to have a mutually agreed upon and successful relationship. And so I love it. And it really is ultimately about customer value. It's not, it helps the selling process, but it's the end game we should always keep in mind.
I think, and Tom Williams and I, when we were prepping for this, we spent a lot of time talking about run through the finish line. And the finish line isn't just it's not the purchase. It's not when they sign on the dotted line as much as we'd like to celebrate.
Well, that's your happy day. That's actually the customer's least happy day, because they're like, I just made $100,000 bet on this vendor. I hope that doesn't come back and bite me in the ass, because they don't know at that point. It can only go it can go wrong at that point. So we like to think of, if you can all fixate on that day. I call it the thank God I gave you money day. If you're focusing on the customer going, I'm so glad I made that risk, I'm so glad I made that bet with you. If you present, that's what we're working towards. First of all, it realigns your entire philosophy to, we're not focused on me closing you. So I'm not going to give you a 20% discount if you sign by the end of the month. that makes buyers feel terrible. And that makes them question your value. Instead, you're saying, I hear that you're working towards this problem. This is your solution to the problem. It's not to sell my stuff, it's to fix your problem. You automatically elevate to being a trusted advisor. And the way to make a map irresistible is it's not your plan, it's their plan. So clearly identify the problem that you've uncovered together in discovery, clearly identify the steps to fixing their problem. Because what you want is you want them to say, boss, you gave me this assignment to fix this problem, or hey boss, I finally figured out why we are choking on this situation. It's because there's this problem. Don't worry, I've come to you with the solution. Here it is. It looks like this. That goes so much further because what you've built is a tool for your champion to advocate inside their organization. So the irresistible mutual action plan is it's the plan to fix the customer's problem. It has bits that you have to do. It has bits that they have to do, but it's the plan towards fixing their solution. And the key is that it has to be at two different levels. The champion needs to be able to bring it into their boss and say, boss, I got the solution. So it can't be, we had a customer come on board. They had 71 steps in their mutual action plan in their spreadsheet version. That's overkill. That really does scare away
that feels like a lot of steps.
It feels like a lot.
They are a very methodical company. And yeah, you were definitely, there was no, I wonder if they know what they're doing question. That was not a concern. So, but when you're presenting this thing imagine that your champion is sharing it with their boss. It needs to be high level enough that the boss can say, oh, that sounds like you got the problem under control. Go ahead, keep doing what you're doing. But it also needs to have enough detail that you can hold each other accountable. So what we do at DealPoint is we have these big milestones, like 7 or 8 milestones, and then sub outcomes underneath. You can do that in a Word doc or a spreadsheet just as well. It doesn't matter what the technology is, but have it so that the boss can see high level, we're on track. And then you can click into the individual milestones where there are people's names on it so that everybody is kept accountable. As long as you're helping them, as long as you have good detail, then it becomes irresistible to the buyer to use it because they see that you've just given them an asset to make their job easier.
Well, and I think that's a question that came up a lot during registration. And Tom, I know Tom Williams, I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this. When's the right time to put this in front of my buyer? When's the right time to do it?
Well, it really does. I hate saying it depends, but I see 2 clear times when you can bring this into play. The traditional, easy, slam dunk time is they've said yes, they want to buy, and now you just need to go through that paper process. The key there is paper process to close, but don't stop there. Make sure that you keep going all the way through implementation and success. And thank God I gave you money, because then you can ask for a referral. So it's real easy. I want to buy it. What do I got to do to buy it? Introduce it there. What we've seen though is our customers actually introduce them at an earlier point in the sales transaction. And it's at that point in discovery when you want to do that trial close. And what you say is, you don't say, I'm going to present the mutual action plan and here's the place where you stick your fingerprint to agree that we're going to do all these things. What you say is, it sounds like we can help you. We've done this a whole bunch of other times. This is what a typical implementation looks like. Can I share that with you? That's that trial close. So you introduce it as a general example of the timeline. You get that trial close. Yeah, I'm interested. But then you say, all right, well, shall we dial this in for you? And before you know it, you're qualifying them and using the map as a guided discovery tool. So it serves as guided discovery. And then that takes them all the way through to that moment of value. The reason that the customer is going to engage in that is, you have to ask yourself, do you want to know how this would work? You shouldn't be afraid to ask that question. That's a critical discovery question. If they say, I don't want to know, then you have to step back. You haven't proven your value yet, or they were never serious in the first place. You need to ask that question. And if they say, no, I don't want to know, then then now you're in a really nice discovery. Well, why don't you want to know how this would work? And that is a great opener to a different kind of value discussion, because that's where you're at. But you may as well know where you're at with the customer. So yeah, easy peasy, bring it in at verbal through all the way through to value, easy. A plus if you bring it in a little bit earlier as an example. This is what it typically looks like. Great. Now can we dial it in for you? And you just bringing him closer and closer, and that continuous qualification. Well, who should be on the security audit? Great. Let's invite them into this plan so that they can get a heads up that we're going to be talking to them in 2 weeks. That's the motion all the way through.
And Tom Williams, this actually question just came to me. How does a mutual action plan, or how would you recommend folks approaching things like proof of concepts or a trial? Is that a separate mutual action plan here? Is it a more abbreviated? What would that change, if anything, about mutual action planning?
Well, that's where that detailed versus high level view kicks in. So if you have something fantastic like DealPoint, then it's real easy because you have a just pilot milestone with some sub steps underneath. I don't think you want to get into the level of here's how you log in and here's where you change your logo. That doesn't belong in a mutual action plan. The mutual action plan is, what do you got to do, or what do I got to do to move us forward? And if that can't be expressed in, say, 3 or 4 key steps, 3 or 4 key outcomes, then you're probably missing the point. You're probably too deep in the weeds. This isn't a place to be filling in surveys or key data points. It's a place to understand what is our plan to go forward.
So that makes a ton of sense. And I know there's a lot of folks here in sales leadership as well. This sounds great. I used to use these when I was running sales and solutions teams. How do you drive adoption into your sales force? Like, how do you actually get your AEs or CSMs or whomever to use and drive the usage of mutual action plans?
First and foremost, trying to get reps to do anything, you can't crack the whip. When I was running sales teams, I had this notion of withholding commission until they had filled in Salesforce to my satisfaction. I ended up with these battles of, well, is 72 words okay? Well, all right, okay, it's got 73 words. Is that okay? Can I have my goddamn money, please? that doesn't work. And likewise, I don't believe that the reps are coin op. I believe certainly all the reps that we have, they want to see the customers be successful, and that brings in the money. So there's 2 directions that rep adoption comes from. They need to believe that it will help their customer if you present this plan to them. So the customer now is driving that accountability to use the map because it helps the customer, it helps the deal move along. That's one bottom up way. But top down, you can also say, we have deal review structure here. That's what we do. And the way we do our deal reviews is we look at your mutual action plans, because that's the closest to the metal, if you like, of where the deal's at. That's where the buyer is engaging and the seller is engaging. So it's not, how do you feel about the deal? Which I've been in a million of those reviews where the rep goes, oh yeah, that one feels great. We had such a great conversation about his dog. Definitely going to close. Not helpful. Much more productive is, well, we're on milestone 3 of 5. We're blocked on this part of the opportunity, and I could really do with an additional resource because it's red, it's blocked. That's going to give you a far better deal review. Having that kind of, if you like, nexus or operational system within your company will force the rep to use the mutual action plan, because that's how you're engaging. The rep's talking to the customer through the mutual action plan. Doesn't it make sense that the rep talks to the manager through the action plan as well? Because then you're all talking the same language, and there's a lot less scope for mistranslation in between what you've told the customer and what you're telling your boss.
Well, and I think it's also, oh, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I guess I just quickly would add that I think the question's a little bit of a trick question, because the reps themselves, there is a corporate mandate to process. So, respectfully, sales operation leaders, CROs have a methodology. They should be deployed. And it shouldn't be a question of if we're using it, it's how we're using it and how we're using it effectively. The best reps we know are already doing it. And most high performing organizations have really high fidelity checklists that sit somewhere below the opportunity management inside of Salesforce. There's either some custom object or something that has been designed to more or less articulate critical things that need to have occurred at any given stage to justify moving the stage forward. If they're built right, they're even triggering the stage development inside the opportunity. So I think Salesforce has done a good job of sort of capturing the historic things that occurred within deal management. But it's the things left to be done that I've always been fascinated about. When you have a mutual action plan and it's agreed upon and we're not yet at that future state, I can see the incomplete work, not the incomplete stages. I know that, yeah, we haven't gotten to negotiation and legal work, but I can really see that the open items more effectively if we use plans. So I actually feel very strongly that the reps shouldn't be deciding whether they get to use this. In my organizations, that would never happen. I think it's more like, how do we all work on it together? And then there's the question of, can we make it buyer forward? Can we actually introduce it and get the buyer engaged? Because planning should always be an internal exercise, and DealPoint and companies like it provide value irrespective of whether the buyer is in the plan. The plan still exists. It's still being managed at scale, and it still has an impact on forecasting and resource planning. And if you're just not doing that, you'd have to argue you're not a very high performing organization.
I think Tom O'Keefe, just on that point as well, it seems like this is also success a little bit, takes care of itself here. If the reps that are muscularly and full-throatedly adopting mutual action planning are your top performers, maybe the mediums, the Bs and the Cs will look up and go, well, all right, that's how he or she is doing it. Maybe I should get on board with this and use it a little bit more fully. I think that's a good point, a good thing.
Yeah, and my view of the future is that these things are going to be triggered almost automatically. So it would not be my choice to create a plan, but rather when a lead gets determined and qualified in marketing and comes through, say, the sales development stage, whether that's in marketing or sales, that the BDR would initiate the initial plan. That is the baseline plan that we've used sort of successfully for most organizations of this size in this industry. And then we would invite the rep to that plan, as well as the buyer, the lead. And it's like a framework now. It's not even an option. And I think we can make that kind of process very clear. So you can tell my interest, going back to your polling question, is that these things would exist and guide the relationship. Because as a company, what I'm trying to get to is, I don't really want my salesperson to dominate the relationship. I want this to be an organizational relationship to this buyer, and they're just handling one phase of it: data gathering, structure, organization, mapping, right, contracting. And then the real work of implementation, support, ongoing success, and value is delivered by the rest of the enterprise. I actually want that all. I want that to be thinking about, our planning isn't about sales leadership and sales planning. It's about business planning with the customer.
That's a very forward-thinking view of it. I come back to, actually, we had Mark Robert speak a few months ago at one of our summits, and it's the same kind of like, this relationship transcends any one set of people, maybe on the buyer's side, right? You didn't even mention that. If we've got this business plan in place, we know, depending on what you're selling into, you could have a different contact over the length of the contract. You could have multiple different contracts. So you've got defense against that. And you're putting your organization in a position where it is a business partner. It's not a technology vendor. It's not something I would swap out, because, wow, working with Tom O'Keefe, he's got me covered every which way from Sunday. Add somebody new to my team, I can get them going. There's a very forward-leaning perspective on this. Awesome to hear. And folks, we're going to jump in. We've got a bunch of registration questions, but we've got a little bit of time left with the two Toms here. Tom Williams, I want to ask you this question that came in during registration, and it's one I haven't heard before, and you kind of approached it a little bit here. When working on mutual action plans, let's say the champion isn't the buyer. What are some strategies? Never happens, right? We're always, and they're always the user too, and the deployer. I mean, it's just like usually one person, right? Swipes credit card. But in situations unlikely when that happens, how do you see mutual action planning getting approved by that buyer who's not your champion?
So there's two stages to that. First of all, if your plan should understand that there are different roles going to be involved in each milestone. So when you're talking to the champion, you say, we know that in the contracting, or let's say in the business case milestone, where we make the business case, we know that it's nearly always the CFO who makes that decision in this kind of situation. So who would that be? And they say, well, that's Susan. And say, okay, if we want this to be successful, then we're going to invite Susan to be part of this milestone. But why, rather than risking her not understanding what the situation is, why don't you and me and her have a 10-minute conversation so that we can tee her up as to what we're trying to do and just give her some context so that you, Mr. Champion, can be successful in engaging with Susan. One of the phrases I heard from recently was, do you think you can answer, Champion, do you think you can answer all of Susan's questions? Or do you think there might be something that you look dumb answering? And there's going to be that concern. So he said, why don't you let me come in? We'll take 10 minutes and just hear what her questions are so that I can arm you with all the answers for when you go do the formal presentation. And that gives you 10 minutes with Susan, the decision maker. That should be enough time for you to make your mark with an introduction of who you are. And then I'm pretty sure Susan's going to call you when she has questions about the value prop. So you brought yourself in by saying, I want to help you, Mr. Champion. Make sure that there are no questions that are going to stump you, with a 10-minute meeting with your boss, with the decision maker. And then this plan is in front of the decision maker. And now she sees the whole context. She's not just being asked a single question. Now she understands why she's being asked that question, because it's in the context of fixing a problem that is big in their organization. So that's how you do it. It's a plan to fix their problem. You offer to be a consultant for your champion to answer the questions that the decision maker is going to have, but you wheel your way in there with a 10-minute, what questions might she ask, discovery conversation.
I think that and we touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but I want to hone in on that point and reiterate what Tom just said there, folks. This is an opportunity for you to do additional discovery on your champion, on the buyer, by saying that question of, hey, Tom, do you think you can answer every question? Or do you feel like you've got everything you need to answer every question that Susan or Janet or whomever has? And when Tom says no, you say, hey, great, let's make you look like a rock star. Let's go take that meeting together. I think that's
they say
phenomenal.
yes. If they say yes, nail them with a toughie. Because you said, well, I've heard CFOs, they often go into the 6-year projections. Oh, I've got those numbers. Do you think that's going to be something she's going to ask about? And you make them squirm a little bit that they don't know everything, because they're not going to want to say, I don't know everything. But it's more like, what kind of questions might she ask? Or are there going to be any other curveballs? You want to put it in a position where you're not saying, are you a moron? Let me come and save you. More like, there's probably going to be some questions that you're not expecting. Why don't we figure those out in advance so that you're not left in front of the board flat-footed?
And that's again a further discovery, right? That's a good opportunity to be like, hey, is this person, are we working together? Is this a partnership, or is this somebody who's maybe just in the advanced stages of tire kicking, right? Tom O'Keefe, I wanted to ask you this. This is a question again that came in during registration. You were talking about this notion of sort of mutual business planning, and it's this ongoing process. A couple questions came in at registration about how do you today see mutual action plans intersecting with quarterly business reviews that organizations are doing?
Yeah, it's really an interesting point. It came up. I kind of hadn't totally thought about that, but if you're doing a great job with mutual action plans at the deal level, inside a technology platform similar to DealPoint or something like it, you now have a new view into the completed and incomplete activities in any given deal and the timelines that they affect. So I think you have an opportunity to obviously manage deals better. I look at business review probably at the end of a quarter as more of a summary exercise to look at, okay, obviously we have as a territory, we've determined that you had a budget, you have resources, you had expectations, things like that. So there's still always that. But probably a new KPI is going to be how many plans do we ultimately create and execute that we don't have today, that relative to the total lead flow or deal, initial deal flow that we had. And we can get some sense of, I think, potentially even better feedback from marketing that, hey, this particular territory or business unit of our organization is being under supported by marketing, or it's actually producing a tremendous number of high value opportunities that are actioned into a nicely structured business plan like these maps are. And that has led to consistent achievement at the quarterly level. Where are we relative to plan and expectation? So they'll probably end up hand in hand to some degree, but the KPI of total plans created, total plans executed, plan, progress. I think those things are going to start to be really more important KPIs almost then, because they're the indicator of success of opportunity management, my estimate will be.
Right.
And we'll probably start to see more syncing of planned opportunity. I believe DealPoint already has some function that if you move a plan forward, it auto syncs the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll see that the plan becomes the driver of everything else once it's institutionalized correctly.
Yeah, because that's the mutual touch point.
Yeah, and I think that is just back to Tom O'Keefe, that point too, of looking at the quarterly business review as this rearward looking thing that spawns forward looking action. Another good way to look at that would be how many plans were spawned, not just by opportunity, right? But you could also pull that back and look at that on a per rep basis. So does it turn out that this rep is either underfed by marketing, or maybe this rep isn't doing full discovery? Yeah. They're missing something that they could be upselling because we're only, our upsell percent is only X, or we're only launching Y plans after QBR from them. But the standard we're seeing across the organization is maybe 15, 12, or whatever it might be.
And that's something that a regular old opportunity wouldn't catch.
Yeah, and analytics eventually, as you start to overlay a more advanced analytics layer on top of these maps, it'll start to indicate relative to your peers, how your maps are performing or underperforming, and, which will be a strong indicator of likely future success as well.
Skynet is almost here, folks. Sales reps, make sure that your Salesforce hygiene is in there. Tom Williams first, and then Tom O'Keefe, I'm sure you've got perspective on this as well. I'm going to ask you a little bit more of the art question. We've talked a lot about the science of building mutual action plans, why they're important, how to get our sales team using them. How can you actually use this to bring a deal back on track, right? I'm selling to Tom O'Keefe. He misses a milestone. What are some tactical tips you have to use the map to pull Tom O'Keefe back on track?
Well, I actually heard this from a customer the other day. We never tell our customers FU, which is follow up. So just never call to follow up.
Just checking in.
Yeah, just check. Did you get my email about checking in? I'm following up on the email about checking in. Nope, that doesn't help anybody. So what the mutual action plan gives you is a bona fide reason to call. So in ideally, you've actually got on the mutual action plan, you've got that compelling event of the customer. So they have a board meeting, they have a kickoff, they have a product launch, their existing solution is up for renewal, some compelling event on their calendar. And you laid out your mutual action plan in anticipation of being live before that, so you can fix their problem. So what you can say is, I know we're only on milestone 2, and I know that 7-8 weeks from now, it looks like a long time away that your next, your old solution goes an end of life, but we have 6 milestones to do in between then, and we can't let everything go to the last week. Otherwise you're going to fail, and then it's going to look bad for you. How can I help you get back on track so you can accomplish your value? Look at the money we talked about. Look at what you told me was important to you. And even here, way at the beginning, we're at risk of going radically off the tracks, and that's going to put your whole value prop at risk. How can I help you get back on track? Way different conversation that I'm calling to follow up, because it's driven in from their perspective and their value prop that you're working on, which is the whole point of the mutual action plan.
I think that's great. And I think that also brings it back to some of the things that Tom O'Keefe was saying earlier about this is really business, right? What's the business value I'm going to unlock for you by working together? And what do we have to do to get there?
Yeah. And you, I think the key is what happens today is you keep going, everything's fine. And then an hour before you're expected to close, it just crunches, and they stop returning your calls like a week before. You're like, oh, what's going on? But that problem started 6 weeks ago. Nobody is walking along, everything's great, really are going, and then the last minute they kill you. Inevitably, that problem started weeks ago. You just didn't know about it. And the mutual action plan highlights that, because you find out 11 weeks ago that those milestones start falling behind. And that's when you can call again and say, I'm pretty sure that this isn't going to land on time unless we make a change. What do you want to do? And it's almost as good to take that deal off the board 11 weeks before it's supposed to close, I'm almost as happy with that as I am with a successful close. What I don't want to see is 11 weeks worth of work in the sales department and the engineering department and getting customer success set up. And if I'm buying hardware, provisioning an account, buying plane tickets, and then it chokes. That I'm unhappy about. And so you can just tell the customer this, I can see all the way back here that we're at risk. If we want to see your value, we've got to get you back on track. Let's talk about it. Let's reschedule everything, or let's kill this deal. And either way, it's fine by me. Just tell me, because right now, 11 weeks out, it doesn't look good.
So
and
much
again, I guess I might look at it, Richard, just a little differently from the CEO's perspective. Again, not looking to be hyper dependent on field sales to drive everything. Once you get a plan in play with a buyer, if we just fast forward to what this could look like, that a plan is initiated in an automated fashion. Participants are invited at appropriate stages. Buyers can compile additional users on their side at appropriate stages. It allows us to trigger a lot of communication in an automated way back to the buyer. Now, it's probably pretty radical right now to think about automation, but if the plan gets off track and activities and commitments aren't being met because the buyer made this plan, it's mutually agreed upon. We have an opportunity now to simply remind them with automation. I can put them into drip campaigns on those stages. I can give them feedback. Hey, this isn't, what you wanted to occur seems to be at risk because there was a milestone that didn't yet get completed by your team. We're here to remind you to come in and do that or update the plan, right? And I'd like to think that eventually a salesperson, if, I think Tom used some simple math, like 30 sales reps doing 20 active deals. How about we get 15 sales reps with 60 deals? And we get way more leverage on our investment as an organization in our go-to-market. And I like that personally, because automation is playing out everywhere. Salespeople are friction. That's always been the case. It's why so many successful companies are creating self-service, self-consumption models. And the days of, you being the field guy who just dominates, that was my role for a long time in enterprise selling. You got to transform and change. And this is a digital buying environment, and Maps and the DealPoint-like technologies enable this to occur in a modern way. And it may just be a matter of time till everybody's doing this.
And I think, Tom, on that point, Brian Halligan's sort of future of selling and buying deck has this notion, and he calls it the consumerization of the buying experience.
Yeah.
I think in San Francisco we call it product-led growth, right? Self-service. There's a bunch of different terms for it, but I think that's absolutely right. Folks, we're at time here. Tom Williams, you're the master of mutual action plans. If folks want to learn more, they should definitely follow you. You've been featured on LinkedIn, on Sales Hacker. You do a great work on this. Just in terms of closing thoughts from both of you, we've covered a lot of ground here today. Tom O'Keefe, for folks that maybe just tuned back on, what's one key takeaway you want folks to leave the conversation with here today? Keep it tweet length, please.
Yeah, purely about automation, modern selling, be inquisitive, right? It's the number one value in my orgs is how inquisitive are you about new technologies, new ideas, new ways of doing things. This train is on the tracks. I suspect you might want to get on board and think about it.
Love it. And then finally, last but certainly not least, Tom Williams, final thoughts for our audience here today.
First, just tying off track, the original name of DealPoint was SalesRail because it makes them buy it. But we got rid of that name. So yeah, get on board. Mutual action plan. It's not a plan to sell your stuff. It's the plan to fix their problem. That's one. And then use the mutual action plans to do your deal reviews, because that keeps your reps honest, and you'll have the most powerful, targeted, focused deal reviews of your career. It's real clear what's happening, and you can have honest conversations with your reps. Is this deal going to close or not? And you don't look like an idiot when you're going in front of the board.
I think that I think we went in a lot of directions that I've been pleasantly surprised by, especially talking about the future of how automation plays into all of this. Both Tom Williams and Tom O'Keefe, who came on relatively short notice, on behalf of the 20,000 modern sales pros in the community, everyone who attended here today, those watching the recording at some point in time in the future, I really do want to thank you both. This is really stimulating conversation, really interesting topic, and you both obviously know your stuff here. So thank you for sharing that perspective. I know you're both incredibly busy.
Thanks. Thank you very much for having us. It was a real pleasure.
Excellent. And with that, folks, the recording will be made available just as soon as Zoom is done with the post-processing. If you want to learn more about Tom and DealPoint, check them out. We'll put the link in the follow-up materials here. And with that, everybody, please stay safe and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.